And the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carlo Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martin Nash. And a header on it there, and that might have been it. That is a goal for Canada. The header was it Jason deVos.
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson is down the goal. The wins bronze for Canada.
Qualified for World Cup 86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. My name is Jason deVos. I'm the Director of Development with Canada Soccer. And as usual, I'm joined by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, it's been another busy week in the Canada Soccer Nation inside world. Talk us through what we've been up to this week.
It has been a busy week. Return to play maybe trumps Canada Soccer Nation inside for just this minute. Yeah, we've got multiple member associations who have approved return to play plans. Prince Edward Island now have players on the field playing in socially distant training environments. So that's great to see, and most coming online over the next couple of days. So things are good. It's good to know that young boys and girls and older boys and girls are back on the field.
Everyone's keen to get back on the field. And I have to say thank you to all of the member associations because they've done a lot of work to get these return to play plans in place and to ensure that they are creating the safest environment possible for kids to come back and start enjoying the beautiful game. So kudos to all the member associations for the work they've done. What have we done in the webinar space? There's been a lot of online content coming out recently.
Yeah, for sure. We had some great webinars over the past week or so. Futsal, Women's World Cup, French language first webinar went. And we've got another Women's World Cup retrospective with Marie-Soleil Baudouin, Chantal Boudreau, and Caroline Chenard coming up this Sunday. So you can register for that via the Canada Soccer Nation Inside page. And as well, we've got another women's national team webinar, the team behind the team. So we'll get to hear from Cesar Milan, the head of physical performance, Sarah Smith, the peak performance manager, and Alex Hodgins, the mental performance lead, who will be joining the Robin and Rian show. And that's Wednesday this week. So you can register for that at canadasoccer.com.
Yeah, all three of them are absolutely outstanding at what they do, and they're such a pleasure to work with. Great people, so really excited about that. We also had some disappointing news this week. Kenneth Heinemuller will be stepping down from his position as the women's national team head coach to take up a position as the head of coach education with the Danish FA. I want to thank Kenneth for all the work that he's done. I met Kenneth back in 2016 when John Herdman, who was then the coach of the women's national team, brought Kenneth in as assistant coach for Olympic qualifying down in Houston. I was part of John's staff down there as well. And we hit it off right off the bat and really enjoyed each other's company. We were kind of the yin and yang. He was the attacking side of the game and I was the defending side of the game. And I was joking around with him earlier today that, I'm so pleased that he's taken to the defensive side of the game in recent years and takes pleasure in clean sheets and enjoys that. So Kenneth's done a lot of incredible work for Canada Soccer. He's been a loyal member of our team and somebody who I feel has really brought a different perspective to things. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Kenneth actually, because he's moving into a similar role as to mine with the Danish FA. So I know that we're going to continue to work closely together, but I just wanted to put it on record of my thanks for all the work he's done, because he's taken that program to another level and put it down in a better place, and obviously given the next person an opportunity to carry on that work and take our women's program to another level. So big thanks to Kenneth Heinemuller for all the work that he's done for us in recent years. We're going to get to the break now, because when we come back, we're going to have a conversation with three gentlemen who were integral components of the United bid to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So stay tuned for that. We'll come back after the break.
So we have a winner for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The member associations of Canada, Mexico and USA have been selected by the FIFA Congress to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Thank you.
Pleased to be joined now by three men who were instrumental in the success of the United bid to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Victor Montagliani is the current vice president of FIFA, the president of Concacaf, and the former president of Canada Soccer. Steve Reid was a Canada Soccer board member since 2006. He's been the vice president from 2012 to 2016. He was elected president in 2017. He's the current president of Canada Soccer. And Mr. Peter Montopoli is the general secretary of Canada Soccer, and he was also the United2026 bid director for Canada. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're all extremely busy, so we'll get straight into the questions. Victor, I'll start with you. When was the concept of bidding to host the Men's World Cup first discussed at Canada Soccer?
You know, the first actual discussion was in 2011. We had already, in essence, won the bid. We already knew that we were going to host the Women's World Cup. It was pretty much a formality. And so I was, and a gentleman by the name of Walter Seabear, who's a legend in sports in Canada, and myself were at dinner with, we had a couple of dinners, and then there was one dinner we had here in Vancouver, and Peter was at that dinner. And Walter, I don't know if anybody knows, but Walter actually Canada had bid for the World Cup once before, for the 1986 World Cup. And we actually got one vote, Walter was telling me, and we bid against, because Colombia was supposed to have it, and then Mexico, and then they had an earthquake. And so Walter was, who had done the Olympics, and he's done many World Cups for FIFA, and he had said I was already kind of, I guess thinking that I was going to be the next president of the CSA in a few months. And so he said, it's time for us to really seriously bid for the Men's World Cup. And I agree with him. And I said it, and we all kind of, it wasn't even spoken. We all kind of acknowledged that it's time. It's time to start thinking big. And at that time, it was 32 teams, and we were thinking of bidding on our own. It wasn't a united bid. And that came about shortly thereafter, when we figured it's a good idea. And when we spoke to the Mexicans, it was they were on board. The U.S. took about 2 years to convince the U.S. That it was a good idea. They had the bad taste of losing out to 218. And so I think when they saw what we could do in 215, it was obvious to them that they were better off getting a piece of something than trying to go at it again alone. And after we actually made a gentleman's agreement to bid for the 32-team World Cup, FIFA had made a decision shortly thereafter to expand it to 48 teams, and now it made even more sense. So we were a bit ahead of the curve, and I think you're going to see a lot more joint bids after that. But it started in 2011 at a dinner table in a restaurant in Vancouver, and there was a lot of political will from the people that needed to have it, and at that time, Steve, who's now the president, Steve has been my vice president all the way through when I was at the province and then at Canada Soccer. So so along with Peter, myself, and Walter, who was a key figure, but even with the Women's World Cup, we had our organizing committee. So, when you said at the beginning the three guys who were key, we were key all the way through. Obviously there's a team behind us that has worked hard, but the political will in a small group of people has really pushed the envelope. Not only for 26, but also even before that with the Women's World Cup and the under 20 Women's World Cup. So it's kind of been a bit of a crescendo leading up to, where we are now in terms of being a host of the 2026 World Cup.
You mentioned those other tournaments, Victor, and I'll ask Steve this question. How did the success of hosting previous World Cup events impact those discussions?
That's a great question. I was actually making a few notes, and I look back to 2007 when we hosted the men's under 20 And that was a bit of a genesis for me, because I was just on the board 1 year before that event. That was a much different event, but it kind of gave us a taste, a flavor for what we could do as a nation. And did an amazing job hosting in smaller venues and larger venues, but it was engaging with all of the people that we needed to, from the municipal to provincial to federal governments, and seeing the appetite that we had in the country and the support that we had from all those levels of government for putting on an event like that. And then over the course of time, we had the opportunity for the women's under 20 in 2014, and the unbelievable success that we enjoyed in 2015 with the Women's World Cup. One of the things that we can also look back on is in 2007, that's when Victor and I were both introduced to Mr. Montopoli. I don't know, Vic, whether you knew Peter before that, but that's when showed up on our doorstep, and he's been such a massive part of the change that we've initiated in the organization. And to be honest, the ability to bring home these type of events and to have such a enormous success with those events. So, it goes back such a long period of time, and we have at this point in time just absolute great comfort in our ability. And I think that was shown when we were out, maybe taking a step ahead of how we actually won the bid when we were out doing our international campaign. But there's so many countries that look at us and look at our success, and we're here for some of those competitions. If you're talking to somebody from Germany or Sweden or Kazakhstan or Ghana, wherever it might be, and they're saying, oh, I was in Montreal, or I was in Edmonton, or I enjoyed, this competition. And they look at Canada as being one of the best countries in the world, one of the best federations in terms of hosting. So long history and great success, and we've got a great group of people that Peter's put together, and Vic and I have enjoyed that along the way. So as I say, that's a bit of the genesis that we've enjoyed getting where we are now.
So the first time, Steve says, Peter, first, he goes, that's when we met. I said, the first time I met Peter was 2005. We went over to Holland, who was hosting the U20s, to do, let's best practices. What are they doing? Yeah. So the first time I meet Peter, we're upstairs. There's a lounge upstairs of this hotel, and order a Dutch beer, and there's some bar nuts there. He has a bar nut, and he goes into an allergic shock. I swear to God. I just met this guy, and I'm like, are you okay? And so luckily somebody had an EpiPen and nailed it in him. Like, the first time I met him, he almost died on us, man.
It's a true story.
Okay. And that's the first time I met him. I'm like, nice to meet you.
Jason, I was out for 2 days. They went traveling around Holland. I was in bed for 2 days with an allergic shock. And that was the first time I met Victor. Yeah, that's a true story.
So it's fair to say you made a good first impression then.
Yeah.
He just subbed him into the pitch, and he's on the stretcher 2 minutes in.
So now when you keep Peter quiet, just get some bar nuts out and we push him.
Duly noted. That's a brilliant story. Peter, hosting a World Cup, it involves so much more than the 3 national associations working together. How are the various levels of government involved in this process for 2026?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. When Victor started to tell the story about the first discussions, then I thought of the immediate following discussions where he and I and Walter had discussions with at the time the federal sport minister, Gary Lund. Victor, you remember Gary in your neighborhood, because He was pushing us to 2026 Summer Olympics. And all three of us put up our hand. We said, Gary, you got this one wrong. He says, what do you mean I got it wrong? I'm the federal sport minister. We said, no, I think we're going to push you in this direction. And it's the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And his eyes opened up. And he said, really? He says, well, try and convince me. And I think we did a pretty good job. Now, Gary, unfortunately, didn't make it to the end, but he started the process. I give him a lot of credit. And he initially had the ball rolling for the Women's World Cup. So, through that effort, the federal government saw what we can do. And I think certainly it's really refreshing to see the videos now on TSN of the Women's World Cup in 2015. And Victor shot me a note today to say, did you see this match? We sold it out. And it, Jason, some of those matches that people wouldn't expect were sold out. We sold out. And it has a long memory on FIFA. And I still meet FIFA staff that come to me and say, Peter, that 2007 FIFA U20 World Cup was tremendous. So, when Steve was talking about the competitions, we're actually going to be, out of 211 FIFA member associations, the only association to host every single FIFA World Cup, youth, senior, men's, and women's. And that's a significant accomplishment for Canada, but we couldn't have done that without governments, and that's the municipal governments, the mayors, the provinces, and certainly the federal government, who have been supportive and behind us all the way. And it really takes a country to move a FIFA World Cup, because a country hosts the World Cup. I don't want to say in the Olympics a country doesn't host the Olympics, but what happens in the Olympics, it's held in one city, one region of a country. The beauty of a FIFA World Cup, we always say, is that it's actually held in a country. And in 2015, when we held it from the Women's World Cup from New Brunswick all the way to British Columbia, that's never been done before, coast to coast in our country, one single competition. And that's the beauty of it. But you need governments to get us through there.
And this event in 2026, the greatest sporting event in the world, is going to involve three nations for the first time. If we go back a couple of years now to the bidding process and the lead up to that, if this was going to be successful, it required three distinct nations to work together. Vic, how did you craft that? How did you work with the United States and Mexico to form the United Bid, and what was that working relationship like?
The working relationship was excellent, because you had at the time Sunil Gulati, who was the U.S. Soccer president, and Sunil's still on my Concacaf council and he's still on the FIFA council with me. So our working relationship has always been very, very good. Listen, whenever you deal with our cousins to the south, whether it's a NAFTA agreement or a bid, there's a certain way that you have to negotiate things, and that's the reality of our relationship. But it was very healthy, very good. The Mexican president at the time actually was Justino. It started off as a guy named Justino Compián, and then it came into a guy named Decio de Maria, who actually, Decio was one of the original negotiators for the NAFTA agreement for Mexico. He's an economist. He's got a PhD. So the guy is a bright guy, but he's a team player. And, to be honest with you, once we got over the line of, okay, we're going to do this, it wasn't actually that difficult, Jason. It was actually quite easily. We share a lot of commonalities already between our governments, between our countries. Whether it's sports leagues that are already cross-continental, whether it's, even within our confederation with our own sport, and how a lot of the business that's done within Concacaf is done on our continent. So to be honest with you, it wasn't that difficult in terms of finally crafting the agreement that led to us launching the United Bid.
This was also going to be the first time that the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, the host would be determined by the FIFA Congress rather than by the FIFA Executive Committee. That meant that the United Bid had to convince the other, I believe, 207 FIFA member associations that they should be selected as the hosts in 2026. Steve, what was that process like? What did that entail?
Yeah, it was obviously a lot different than what people had experienced in the past. I think one of the most important things that we did is that we did not have one chair of our United bid. We had 3 co-chairs. So we really presented ourselves as being equal in terms of our leadership, in terms of our approach to everything. The 3 co-chairs were myself and Carlos Cordero, who had succeeded Sunil Gulati, and Decio Di Maria, as Vic alluded to. We created 3 teams, Team Red, Team Green, Team Blue, for obvious reasons, the predominant colors of our country's flags. I think it was really compelling because people saw it as a real collaborative effort. They didn't see it as being led by any one country. It was really a joint effort. We had some amazing people on the ground there. Peter was part of one of the teams. Sandra Gage was part of my Team Red. I also had the Deputy General Secretary from Mexico on my team. So we had representation on each of those teams from each of the federations, each of the countries. And we went out and we started our international campaign. And that's how it was always presented. It was presented as equal partners in this endeavor, talking about what each federation, each country would bring to the table. And we're all different. Each of us has our own strengths and our own weaknesses. But I think all together, we really showed, enormous strength in what we could bring. And to be honest, it was one of the most enjoyable times of my life. I've pointed out this before when I've done summits or done speaking engagements, that of the 5 most important times of my life, 5 points where I look back on. One was getting married. I always have to say that. Getting married to my lovely wife, Susan.
You better.
Happy. The birth of each of my children. I've got 3 boys, 3 adult men now. And winning the right to host the World Cup 2026. So, it was such a great experience, such an amazing journey. But it was so important in terms of our international campaign and going out, seeing all of the federation presidents, seeing all of their board members, and trying to engage as much as possible with all of the other footballers, all the football people throughout the world. So it wasn't talking to just FIFA Council. It was talking to everybody that was involved with world football in as many countries and cities as possible. And as I say, it was a great time. It was a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of travel, but a hell of a lot of work at the same time.
Yeah.
So
we're going to get to the vote in a second, because I want to talk about your reaction specifically when the announcement was made by FIFA President Gianni Infantino. But before we get there, I want to talk about the United2026 bid book. If you're listening and you haven't seen the bid book, you should go on Google and do a Google search for United2026 bid book. It's a 500+ page document that gives so much detail about what 2026 is going to look like. And it leads with the 3 words: unity, certainty, and opportunity. Those are powerful words, Peter. Talk a little bit about what those 3 words symbolize for the World Cup in 2026.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? 500 pages, but it was really 3 words that brought us together. Now, Victor makes unity sound simple, and it's a real credit to him, because I'm not sure when I traveled with the Mexican president and the U.S. soccer president that I saw a lot of unity all the time. But it's a real credit to Victor and his ability to either negotiate or build relationships with people that all 3 of us were united, in the big picture. While we were traveling, there were times where, in football, Mexico and the United States, they're bitter rivals, but they understood the bigger picture. And we were all united, traveling across the globe and selling the bid. The certainty was easy. I mean, we currently still have 23 candidate host cities. Each one has a stadium already built. And why would we need to do something that Brazil did and build 8 to 10 stadiums, each $1 billion? It's not necessary in this day and age. So we provided FIFA and all the member associations with that certainty that we're not spending money on infrastructure. We're spending money on football and developing football, which was really, in the eyes of the member associations, what they wanted to hear. And the opportunity is the tremendous amount of revenue that can certainly be generated and invested back in football. So you take all three of those words, and in the end, it made total sense. So the sales pitch, if we want to call it that, was easy. We just had to keep to the message of unity, certainty, and opportunity. But Jason, when we were doing that, it always came down to this level of discussion. And I know Victor had the same and Steve had the same. When we were meeting the other MAs, they all wanted to talk to the Mexican president or the Mexican representative about football, because that's why we were there, clearly. And they were the leaders. They are the leaders of the three of us. Secondly, they wanted to talk about dollars. Well, okay, we've got United States in the room and we're talking dollars. But more importantly for us, Jason, they wanted to talk about humanity. And that's where Canada came in. And Canada was always what they said, that they have a relative, they have a friend, they have somebody, a family member that lives in Canada, and they are coming to Canada before they go to the United States or Mexico because it's more important to them.
Yeah.
And to me, I felt Canadiana. And every time I went in that room, that flag was wrapped around my shoulders. And that's what I heard them say to us, that Canada was so important to this bid because it was important to them. It makes you feel really special, Jason, I have to tell you.
Or they would say to you, my cousin lives in Scarborough. Do you know him?
Listen, Vic, I'm not lying. That's exactly what I was just going to say. My cousin John lives in Edmonton. Have you met him? Yeah. And I always say, oh yeah, I know John. We see each other all the time.
but you know, it's funny. I mean, Steve laid out, you know, sort of the traveling Wilbury strategy that we had, and you know, but it was a lot more complex. You know, I mean, Steve made us. I know it was pleasurable, and now that we look back upon it, it's probably even more pleasurable, especially having a nice glass of Cabernet. But I tell you, you know, it was like the bid happened 2 or 3 times in terms of, because, you know, we had our teams laid out that would go out and you know, traveling, you know, ridiculous, you know, circuits or milk runs, you know, then we would say like, Concacaf will obviously, well, I'll take care of Concacaf for obvious reasons. I'll take care of South America for obvious reasons. Okay, this team does Asia and Europe and this and Africa. We even actually did Africa as well, if I'm not mistaken, right, Steve? What team went down to Africa?
Finish your thought, Vic, and I'll tell that story.
Yeah, because we figured, you know, you never know. You could pick up a few, and we did. And then, but then what happened was, we get to Moscow, right? And we're there. I was there about a week before, you know, give or take. And you got to do it all over again, right? Because you know, with all due respect, having the Congress vote on this sounds democratically and academically great. But you're dealing with 211 different cultures. And when the guy says, yeah, I'll vote for you, I got news for you. That's not always the case, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to grind again, right? And, you know, so every night it's like you're up till 4 a.m, and then up at 7, you're going to hotels, you're, you know, everybody's dispersing everywhere. And so it was like you did all that for the 60 days before, you know, between the teams and other people doing this. And then you get to Moscow and you got to actually redo it all again. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, what happens is you start hearing things and, oh my God, are those guys going to turn on you? You know, it's like, and, but yeah, it's, it was, you know, now that you look back up on it, Steve's right. But I tell you, in the moment, I'm not sure how pleasurable it was. I got to be honest with you. So.
Yeah, I think it's always colored, Vic, by the number of years or months in between the time that we actually did the travel and where we are. And I've got great memories.
It's like that tapping from two yards out becomes a 40-yard screamer in about 15 years.
But it was really more about the relationships and the friendships that were created.
100%.
But you're right. I mean, I believe that I slept more on planes than I did in beds or hotel rooms. It was just catching whatever you could. But back to your point about how hard you had to work and sleepless nights and travel. Vic said, we actually did end up going to Africa, and it was after the Confederation president had come out and said that they were going to support the Moroccan bid. So how many African federations are there, Vic? There's
55.
55. So we were going like, oh, okay, all 55 are going to Morocco. And it was like, okay, well, we're going to go anyway. But the timing was such that in my particular circumstance, I'd been away from home for close to a month. And I hadn't seen my wife in that entire time. So I said, okay, come on, honey, I'm going to get you a flight and I'm going to bring you in. We're based in London. So I booked her a flight to come into London on June the 3rd. So just a little more than a week before, we were heading off to Moscow. And so at that time, Carlos had arranged for us to see some of the African federations, and decided that I was the guy that needed to go down to lead that team. So he got me and a few others, and I left London on June the 3rd while my wife was flying in. And I sent her a text message, hopefully she got it when she landed, saying, honey, I'm going to see you in about 4 or 5 days. I have to go down to Johannesburg. So I'm still married, and everything works out.
Right. but Steve, what you're not saying is the words you told me when you found out you were going to Africa. Those weren't the same words of, honey, I'll see you a little later. I think it was a little different.
Well, Jason doesn't have the bleep button right now, so
I can imagine. I'm married as well, Steve.
Analysis, we ended up getting through the course of that trip and through meeting individual federation presidents and their boards, we secured, I believe, 14 to 17 votes from African federations. So never say never. We got down there, we did the business, and met the people. And even though their confederation was guaranteeing support of all of them, we managed to pull that many back. And, it just shows you what you can do when you are committed to the cause.
So this process started in 2011. Well, fast forward 7 years to June 13th, 2018 in Moscow at the FIFA Congress. And FIFA President Gianni Infantino is announcing the winner, and he announces the United bid. What's going through each of your minds at this point in time? What did you experience? We'll start with you, Victor, and then we'll go across all three.
So I'm on the stage.
Yeah, you're right beside. You're right there.
I'm
up on
right
top.
beside Johnny.
Was it a fist pump under the desk, or?
So I got my head down. I got David Gill, who from the ex-CEO of Manchester United, who was on the FIFA Council at the time, sitting beside me, and I got my head down, and the music's going because they're counting the votes and all this, and he goes, "Relax, mate." Right? He's trying to, and I'm like, and I said something that I can't say on the air to him, so then I look over to my left, and Steve and Peter's there, and Carlos and everybody, and they're all waiting as well. And so all of a sudden it comes in. Well, it pops up on Infantino's screen, right in front of me. So I'm the first one to see, other than him, I'm the second one to see it, but I can't really move an inch. Right? Because can you imagine? Can you imagine if I jumped up? Right? I'm like, so I just got my head down. I go, can you hurry the F up and announce this thing? Right? And then so then they announce it, right? And you know, then everybody goes crazy. But so I actually saw it, I would say maybe 20 seconds before it was actually announced, but those 20 seconds felt like an hour, right?
Well, you put a good poker face on, that's for sure.
Oh my God, it was hilarious. Yeah.
The cameras cut immediately from Mr. Infantino to the United delegation, and as soon as he announced the United bid, Steve, you looked to the heavens and you know, put your hands together in prayer. And I think the best way to describe it is relief and exuberance combined into one. What was going through your mind at that point in time?
Absolutely, no question. Very, very well described. It was, you know, people ask after the fact, they say, well, listen, the votes were so one-sided in the end. Were you worried? Be honest, I was absolutely worried right until the announcement was made. No certainty at all. I never, you know, guess about elections. You know, things can happen. And when it was announced, I think I might have reacted more quickly than others, because when they announced it, they didn't say the hosting will be granted to the United bid. They said to the federations of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So when I heard "can," I immediately reacted to, you know, to hearing the beginning of the name of our country. And yeah, absolutely overwhelming, because there was so much emotion leading up to it, so much work put into it. But yeah, absolutely so happy when that happened. And one more observation, when we, you know, kind of were slapping each other on the back, and, you know, lots of hugs around. And then we had the three co-chairs, the federation presidents go up to the podium. Vic was already on his feet and over by the podium. And I remember this vividly because I got a huge hug from Victor. I mean, I've known him for 20 plus years, and we're great friends and have gone through so much together. But, you know, I got a big hug, and there was a few tears as well. And I'm pretty sure he said, "I love you, man." So there was some man love there as well. And it was just such an amazing experience for all of us from all three federations, three countries. So yeah, absolute relief and absolute exuberance for the victory.
Peter, one of the big aspects of the World Cup, expanding to 48 nations for the first time. There's going to be a total of 80 games played over the duration of the tournament. What's the economic impact going to be in Canada, and how is this going to benefit the game in our country moving forward?
Oh, significantly. Before I get to that, just to get my part in on winning the bid, I think I was just extremely proud for everybody from our country that was a part of it. Sandra Gage, Joe Guest, Don Hardman, all the people that worked really, really hard in the back rooms to put the 500 pages together. Mm-hmm. So our staff were incredible. And let's remember one thing. Alfonso Davies led off that bid presentation. Let's think about that now. And he,
how good was he, by the way? He was amazing.
and as amazing as he was, he would tell you when we did the first kind of rendition, and Steve saw it, he wasn't as good. You know, it took some time. It took a couple days in Moscow to get to that level. But, you know, he's a star, and he put it all together. And we, you know, there's a piece of us that feels like we're all part of introducing Alfonso to the rest of the world and his amazing story and where it's led to right now. It's a piece of his journey. That bid presentation was outstanding, and proud of Steve and how he delivered that, and for everybody in our country. As far as the economic impact, you know, we're looking at that $1 billion plus. You know, there's 10 matches in Canada, but it's not only the 10 matches. It's everything that'll happen before the competition. It's all the fan fests that'll be held across the country for the other 70 matches that'll be held throughout the competition in the United States and Mexico. It's the party. It's everything that it can generate for our country, but more importantly for our sport that we're currently in developing on. But it'll be significant, and it'll change the sport significantly for our country, and it's something we've long desired. So it's a great opportunity for us as Canada. I think we have the most to gain over Mexico and the United States, and I think we're going to take advantage of it.
I've said this before, the 2015 Women's World Cup hosting in Canada, I mean, the number of children that I saw, boys and girls across the country in the stadiums who were utterly inspired by the players, specifically our players, Christine Sinclair and her teammates, that is going to pay dividends down the road in decades from now when those kids are older. We talk often about legacy and the legacy of a tournament like this. What are the legacy components that we can expect for all three nations out of the 2026 World Cup? We'll start with you, Victor.
Well, I think the legacy has to be multi-layered and multi-leveled. Obviously, the football one is got to be primary, and trying to build the pool of players that we're starting to build now, and parlay that into sustained success beyond 26. I mean, hopefully we can get there in 22. But the sustainability of success, we were there in 86 and we were not able to sustain that. And so I think from a footballing standpoint, it's the sustainability of our programming and our football and our development. The other legacy is really putting the game where it needs to be in terms of, I think our game, is so wrapped up in volunteerism, and, it's still a very amateur sport in our country, and that's great. And it's great to see that. But the problem is that doesn't play well in Bay Street, and the circles that you need to have influence for your game. And that's one of the things we've suffered from historically in Canada. This sport in other countries, and I've seen it now, traveling where I travel, this sport in every other country, it's not just because it's a big sport, but the people involved in the sport are so influential in their countries. And I think this is where we're starting to get to. We have a little bit of that, but it's such a small group of people. And the reality is that we need to build 2026 where people are now listening to our sport. We're at the front of the line when we speak to cities, when we speak to federal governments, when we speak to provincial governments, and that we are in this, we're in the front line like the other national sport in our country. And I think that is actually what we need to build upon. And because that will help us as it relates to every other issue that we want to push forward, whether it's governance, whether it's competitions, whether it's development. I think the legacy needs to be that as a sport and as a soccer nation, that our voices are heard. And because they're not heard loud enough and often enough in this country.
That's a great point. Steve, you're stepping down as president at the end of your tenure. In 6 years' time, in 2026, what do you hope to see at the World Cup?
I am very, very confident that we will be hosting one of the best World Cups, FIFA World Cups in history. In Canada, I know we're going to enjoy sold-out crowds for every match that we have in the three candidate host cities, in Edmonton, Montreal, and Toronto. And I think one of the things that I would hope that we all agree on, that we're going to see an unbelievably competitive Canadian men's national team. We have such a great group of exciting young players that are coming up. We've got our own domestic league that's been launched that should provide more depth of talent than we've had before. We've got three great franchises that are in MLS that are also developing young players for Canada. So, I think it's just a really exciting time for Canadian soccer. Vic pointed out that we need to be more relevant in those circles. And I think that we have, over the course of time, achieved that in terms of hosting different events, and in particular on the women's side, where when we're going to government, when we're talking to Sport Canada, when we're talking to different stakeholders, they've seen the history of women's soccer and how it's grown and how it's developed and what we've done in that space. And I think that over the next 6 years, if we can emulate that, if we can do the same thing on the men's side, that's going to be a significant legacy. And I think we're really, really well positioned to do so. This is a great opportunity for us to be on the world stage. And it's an amazing opportunity as well, because we've got, just some amazing young talent that is coming forward. We talked about Alphonso Davies, but there's many, many more that are part of the program right now and will be in the future. So I'm really excited about it. I just hope that Peter will kick me a few tickets for 2026. As past president, maybe I can still get in.
Let me talk to Victor, Steve. Let me talk to Victor about that.
No problem. We'll try to get a fan zone near your house. Don't worry about it.
You want to get him on record now, Steve, while it's being recorded.
Exactly.
Peter, over to you. In terms of legacy, what are your thoughts looking ahead to the World Cup in 2026?
So maybe I'll share the perspective, and it's a lot of the same words that Victor echoed and Steve amplified. But I go back to when I started that fateful day in 2005 where I almost died. Thank you, Victor. But people said, you're crazy to try and take on that 2007 FIFA World Cup. Nobody buys tickets in soccer. They expect everything for free. And I think, Jason, we proved everybody wrong. At the time, it became the largest attended FIFA event in history outside of the Men's World Cup. And we proved that people will pay to watch football. There's no doubt about it. And after that, MLS came in with TFC, and people are paying, and they're still paying to watch football. And Montreal Impact, Whitecaps, and now the CPL adding to that legacy. So that barometer is gone. 2015 comes around, the FIFA Women's World Cup. People said to me again, are you going to sell those large stadiums? And you know what, Jason, we did. And I think the proudest thing when I think of the Women's World Cup, many, many things that Steve was a part of and Victor was a part of, but I just see the color red. And every time I look at those stadiums, I see red. And people were coming to our matches wearing soccer jerseys, our Canada jersey red. Now, it used to be they used to come with hockey jerseys. They used to come with Canadian Olympic Committee jerseys. But Jason, they came with their Canada soccer jersey. And why I say those two things of 2007, 2015 is what Victor talked about, building the culture. So we've invested heavily to build that culture. And by 2026, it's on a complete other course, another level of that culture. And if we do it right and we get it right, and not only what we're trying to build off the pitch, but more importantly on the pitch with John and the players and Alphonso and Jonathan David and everything that's part of this system, if we get it right, then people in our country are talking about football and hockey. That's it. That's where we need to get to, because I believe a country deserves a good winter sport and a good summer sport. I believe we can get there. But if you asked us in 2005, no chance. But it's going to take 20 years, and we're halfway there. Well, more than halfway there to get us in 2026 where this sport needs to be. I think that's the true legacy.
Yeah, it's very well said, Peter. I've said many times, I've never been more excited about the future of our sport than I am right now on both the men's and the women's side, because I see the talent that's coming through our system. I see alignment from top to bottom in our development system. And I see the prospect of the greatest sporting spectacle on earth coming to our country in 6 years to inspire the next generation. That's down largely to the work that the three of you did. And I'm so pleased that you mentioned those other names, Peter. People like Sandra Gage and Joe Guest, who did so much work behind the scenes. I know you're all very busy. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us today about the World Cup 2026 coming to Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Final words, Victor. I'll give you the chance to sign off. Take us to the break.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. First and foremost, I think for me, obviously the last few years. one of the things I'm proud about is I get to wrap the Canadian flag around me when I travel with the Concacaf and FIFA hat, and it's something I never forget. I sometimes it breaks my heart knowing the potential and the good people we have in the game. When I hear Canada's not a footballing nation, I know it's not true because of the people that you had already mentioned, the people that are on this phone call, and so I know where we can get to. I think we all know we can get to. Sometimes we're impatient that we need to get there quicker than we like to. But I think 2026 will be the catalyst to us becoming what we really are, and showing everybody that we won't become a football nation, but the football nation that we are. And I think our memories are going to be, it's got to be sustainable. I mean, the last time we won anything on the men's side, a guy named Jason DeVos, headed something at the back post. Well, it's a great memory, but that was 20 years ago, mate. And so we need more sustainability. We need more people. And Steve alluded to the players that are coming, but we need people to push and push and push. And to be honest with you, I said this when I left and passed the baton on to Steve. We have to think big, Jason. Mm-hmm. As Canadians, we need to think big. And for instance, we have to say that in 2026, we need to get to the quarterfinal. We need to get to the semifinal. It's not about just participating. We need to think big. And, and I that's what I want to leave you with, is that 2026 is not the destination. It's just a big marker on the journey for Canada. But we need to think big, and we can't use excuses and words that we've used in the past that were excuses to not think big. So for instance, when we say grassroots, the membership, don't hide behind those words. You can think big even if you work in the grassroots. There's big ideas in the grassroots. There's big ideas in coaching education, as you have shown through your leadership, Jason, right? We need to think big in all facets of our football in this country. And so I want to leave you with that, is those two words. We need to think big and push to have a World Cup that all of us will remember. And that will be the starting point for us as a country, not the final destination.
Brilliantly said, Victor. Thank you very much. Think big. Victor, Steve, Peter, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. All the best to you and to your family. Stay safe and be well. We'll talk soon. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. Think big, Victor Montagliani said. We'll touch on that in just a second. I think those are important words for every level of the game in Canada moving forward in the years to come. But massive thank you to Victor, Steve, and Peter for taking us on a bit of a journey there around the genesis of the 2026 Men's World Cup coming to Canada, United States, and Mexico. You hear the stories behind the awarding of the tournament and the work that went into it. It was an incredible journey for so many people. Brad Fougere joins me now. Brad, on June 13th, 2018, where were you and what were you doing when this announcement was being made over in Moscow?
How fun was that chat?
It was amazing. It was amazing.
For sure. That day started on June 12th for me. It was lots of uncertainty about the way that the Congress was going to roll out. And as they alluded to, this was the first time that the Congress was voting to determine the host for the 2026 World Cup. So in the days and literally months leading up, we were unsure exactly how that was going to go. We were unsure of how that day was going to roll out. So a group of us in the communications team found ourselves in the office sort of late the night of the 12th, knowing that Central European time, or Russian time, I guess it was, meant that this could start as early as sort of 2 a.m. Ottawa time. And so we spent the night in the office, watching online, just comments coming through and people thinking about it and feeling questions from people on social media. One or two of us tried to catch a cat nap, and then when it finally happened, Steve zeroed in on it. When they made the announcement, they announced that the federations of Canada, the United States and Mexico had won. And as soon as they said federations, we knew we'd won. So we jacked, "We are the champions." And I ran out front of the building. It was probably 9:00 in the morning. So there was traffic going up and down the street wearing my Canada Soccer jacket, just like sort of yelling out in jubilation. I'll share that Instagram post somewhere in the next days. But yeah, it was euphoric. It was, hearing about the work that was happening. And I'm so glad that we got to bring those stories, because you and I have heard those stories, and internally at Canada Soccer, we've all sort of seen the battle scars of what went on as teams, red, green, and blue went around the world. But yeah, just, we were all working hard. And I think you were driving through the night to get to TSN. Is that right?
It wasn't actually TSN, but I was up all night. Like, I couldn't sleep. I like yourself, I knew that the Congress was due to start sometime around 2 a.m. So, I'd set my alarm for 2 a.m. and went to bed at 10 or 11 and tried to sleep, couldn't, just tossed and turned the whole night. And finally I just got up at like midnight and I said, you know what, I'm just going to do an all-nighter here. And what was infuriating was all of the delays. And then when they announced they were going to take a break for an hour, I nearly threw my remote control at television. My whole house was sleeping, but I was up and pacing, and I just couldn't sleep. I was just so jacked and excited, but nervous as well. The one thing that Peter didn't say is that the committee members did an incredible job of keeping everybody else in the dark. Like, we had no idea how the vote was going to play out. We were reading everything in the media just like everyone else was. And in the end, when the vote came through, it was a pretty comprehensive vote. So they must have had a level of assurance or confidence going into the vote when it did happen. But the rest of us were on tenterhooks waiting. So I ended up driving into downtown Toronto because most of our senior management team was either scattered around the world or in Moscow or wherever. So in the inevitable outcome, whether we won or lost, someone needed to talk to the media about it. And so I was obviously preparing both sides of the story, but it was a sleepless night. But I can tell you, when they made the announcement, when Mr. Infantino read out the federations of Canada, I was just like everybody else, just elated, excited. It's been a dream of mine to play for my country in the World Cup, and obviously those days are behind me now. But to have a men's World Cup come to our shores, to inspire the next generation of kids, is just such a powerful, powerful vehicle. We saw 5 years ago in 2015, and I was in a different role. I was working for TSN at the time as a soccer commentator. It was amazing to go around the country and to see how many kids were inspired by Christine Sinclair and her teammates. And yes, the outcome of the tournament wasn't what we wanted. It was hugely disappointing to lose to England at Vancouver and BC Place. But I'll echo the comments of the three gentlemen, to look out into the crowd and see a sea of red of people wearing Christine Sinclair jerseys and Canada Soccer jerseys was just incredible. It was amazing. It gives you goosebumps, and it just reinforces my belief that this is a footballing nation. We are a footballing nation, and we have people in places now where they're driving the game forward. What John's doing on the men's side, leading the Excel program and the men's national team program, driving it forward and holding people accountable and supporting people to be the best version of themselves. The work that has been done on the women's side, and where we go now moving forward, obviously with Kenneth moving on, there's an opportunity now for someone else to come in and take us to another level. So it really is an exciting time to be involved in Canadian soccer, and I can't wait for 2026 to see what that looks like. But I want to go back to the conversation with Victor, Steve, and Peter, and get your thoughts, Brad. What was the big takeaway for you?
They're a fun bunch, for one. You have to love what you do, but you also have to have fun at what you do. And the three of them are extremely successful. Jason, we talk about this all the time. the legacy of international events that Peter Montopoli has on his resume is second to none, right? It's mind numbing, the success that he and Sandra Gage and Victor and Steve, as it relates to football, and the just how far they drove football forward. I mean, I was at the final of the U20 World Cup in 2007, and that was sort of one of the things that rekindled my love of the game and got me back into coaching. I started coaching around that time. That was such an important tournament for me, just as a lover of the game. But yeah, just the momentum. What incredible momentum from the beer nut incident to where we are today, and the opportunity that sits in front of us all. And it really does sit in front of us all. And we need to start driving this message home on this podcast and in the conversations that we have from day to day, because you hear Victor say things like, have big, hairy, audacious goals, dream big, think big. It's crazy if you're not thinking big at this point. Like, these are important times.
Yeah, 100%. Like we're dealing with a global pandemic and the fallout of that. And we talk to people at the grassroots level. And I love that Victor mentioned that too, that the work that's being done at the grassroots level, if you're in a community club, if you're at a volunteer-based organization, why can't you think big? Think big about the next opportunity, about what's coming, where your players could get to. These are some of the things that we need to start celebrating in Canadian soccer, not who wins the Under-7 World Cup championship, because it doesn't exist, but where did Alphonso Davies play his youth soccer? Where did Jonathan David play his youth soccer? Who's producing players or creating environments for players like that to stay and fall in love with the game and then continue the hard work and then move to a higher level? We need to start celebrating things like that. So I think that message is the one that really stood out for me. Think big. As a nation, why can't we do this? What's holding us back? Oftentimes I've said this, the only thing holding us back is ourselves and each other. And we have to get away from this mindset of tearing others down to make us big, be bigger. We have to start supporting each other, supporting other people, working together collaboratively. One of the things I think that's been a silver lining to the global pandemic has been, I feel we're really getting there. We're starting to get to a point where people are starting to really work together. There's a lot more of a humanistic approach where people are caring for each other, and that goes across our industry. So for me, that was the big takeaway. Think big. 2026 is a very short 6 years away. And we're gonna be watching the Canada's men's national team play in the World Cup, and not just play either. That's the other piece too. Let's go and try and win. Let's go and win. Let's be successful. Let's get out of the group stage. Let's get to the knockout stage. Let's do what South Korea did in 2002, which shocked the world. No one thought it was possible. But I know it is possible. And with the people we have running the program now, the players that we have coming through our system, the sky's the limit. And why would we put limitations on ourselves? So plenty to be excited about. Really looking forward to it. Again, I want to thank Victor Montagliani, Steve Reed, Peter Montopoli for taking the time. It was a lot of fun. I wish we could do it more and do it more often. It was a great conversation. But to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. Much appreciated. Stay safe, be well, look after each other, and we'll see you next week. Take care.